Hey, what's going on everybody? In today's video, I'm going to get a little more in depth with creating components. And by the end of this topic, we will be creating our own card component. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. In today's topic, I'm going to get a little more in depth with React components. As we've discussed in the previous topic, a component is a section of reusable JSX code. It's HTML-like code that can contain JavaScript. I thought today we could create some card components. Card components are fairly popular with React applications. Typically, they involve a picture, a title, and a description. You can use cards for all sorts of things. In the previous topic, we did delete all of the contents within our app function. Let's go ahead and do that now if we haven't already. And we'll delete these imports. We will not need them for this lesson. In the previous topic, we did have a style sheet for our app component. We can delete this too. We are now ready to begin. Within our source folder, we will create a new file. The name of the component will be card. This is a JSX file. JSX meaning JavaScript XML. Our components will be function-based. Function, type the name of the component, card, parentheses, then curly braces. We will be exporting this component so that we can import it elsewhere. So type export, default, the name of the component, card. Within our card function, we will be returning some HTML-like code. We'll begin with the div element. We will be applying some CSS styles. We will need to set the class. However, with JSX, class is a reserved keyword. To set an element's class, we have to instead use class name. Do pay attention to the capitalization. The N is uppercase. Okay, we will set this div section equal to card. So cards typically have an image. We'll include an image element. We'll set the source later. They usually have a title. We'll use an H2 element. And a description. We'll include a paragraph. For our H2 title, why don't you go ahead and type in your name? I'll type in my YouTube channel name, but feel free to use your own name. Then let's add a description. For the description of your card, type in what you do for a living, or if you're a student, what are you studying? For me personally, I make YouTube videos. And add a hobby of yours. I make YouTube videos and play video games. So far, so good. Let's import our card component just to be sure that it's working. Within our app component, I will at the top import the name of the component, card, from a file location. These files are right next to each other. So I will type ./card.jsx. Within our app component, we will return, within the return statement, list the component we would like to return. We will return our card component. To include a component, within angle brackets, type the name of the component. These are typically in pairs. You need an opening tag and a closing tag. And there's our card so far. We'll be applying some CSS styling momentarily. There is a shortcut in place of using an opening and closing tag. Take the opening tag, end it with a /. That's also valid. Let's head back to our card component. We'll include an image. Within our opening image tag, it is good practice to set the alt attribute, just in case this image can't be displayed, or if somebody is using a screen reader, the alternate text will be displayed, or read out loud. We'll include a profile picture for us. Let's set the alternative text to be profile picture. We're going to set the source attribute. Now, I recommend pausing the video and finding a profile picture of yourself from, Facebook or Twitter or whatever you use for social media. Pick a smaller picture. Something around 200 by 200 pixels would be decent. If you don't want to follow along, you can include a placeholder image just for this lesson, which you can get from this site. This will be an external URL, via.placeholder.com/150. That will give you a placeholder image. Otherwise, if you have an image you would like to use, I'm using the profile picture for my YouTube channel. All we gotta do is place this image within our assets folder. From our card class, we will import that image. Import. Then we need a name for this import. I'll name my import profile pic from a location. So we need to navigate to the assets directory, then get our image. // the assets directory / the name of the image. So mine is profile and it's a JPEG. Yours is likely going to be different, do pay attention to that. Profile.jpg. For the source attribute, I will set this equal to a set of curly braces, then we will include our profile pic that we're importing. There's my profile picture. Depending on the dimensions of your profile picture, it might be fairly big. You may want to choose a smaller image, or otherwise within our CSS file, we can change the dimensions of the picture. Okay, let's head to our CSS style sheet. We already do have some global CSS properties already applied, but I'd like to start fresh. Let's delete everything within the CSS style sheet. That should eliminate all CSS within our web page. We will select the name of the class, card. Remember that with JSX, we use class name, not class. Within our index CSS style sheet, let's select our card class. I'm going to go through these CSS properties real quick. We should already have some experience with CSS. Okay, let's add a border. Border, 1 pixel solid. I'll set this to be black. I do like using HSL values. I'll pick a light gray color. Let's set the lightness to about 80 for the border. I'll set the border radius to be 10 pixels to round the corners. The corners should now be rounded, as you can see here. I'll add a box shadow. The first value is for the horizontal offset. The second is for the vertical offset. The third value is for the blur radius. I'm going to pick a lighter color though. So I'm going to select black, change this to an HSL value. But I'm going to change the transparency to be 10%. So 0.1. That is not bad looking. Okay, let's add a little bit of padding. 20 pixels. Padding is found between the elements and the border. So if I were to increase this, we have more padding, but let's stick with 20. I'll add some margin. Margin is for the space outside of the border. Let's go with 10 pixels. I'll text align center to center the elements within. Text align center. I'll set a max width for the card to be 250 pixels. Then I will set the display to be an inline block. In case we have more cards, they'll at least flow within our container if we have more, because normally divs are block level elements. Okay, so let's work on the card image next. We'll head back to our card component class. We'll add a class name to the image element. Class name equals, let's say, card image. Go back to our CSS style sheet. We are accessing our card class, then access the card image class within. I will set a max width. I will set a max width to be 60% of the width available. I will set the height to be auto, to automatically resize. If you would like a circular image, you can set the border radius to be 50%. I'll add a little bit of margin on the bottom, with margin bottom 10 pixels. Alright, let's work on our title next. Going back to our card component, let's add a class name. The class name will be card-title. Going back to our CSS style sheet, we will select our card class, then select the card title class. With my card title, I will set a font family to be pick a font. I like Arial. I'll set a backup of sans serif, in case Arial can't be displayed for some reason. I'll set margin to be 0 to remove any margin. I'll set the text color too. We'll set the color property to be pick a color. Again, I'm using HSL values. I'll set the lightness to be 20%. Now let's change our card text. Going back to our card component, within our paragraph element, we will set the class name to equal card-text. Going to our CSS style sheet, we will access the card class, then access the card-text class. I'll set the font family to be Arial as well. And I will change the color. I'll set the lightness to be 40%. Again, I'm using HSL values. Maybe 30. I would say that looks decent enough. We have now created and styled a card component. Within our app component, we can reuse the card component. However, if I were to add another, well, JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Our return statements are only designed to return a single element. You can enclose all elements within what is known as a fragment. It's an empty set of angle brackets. Then technically, we're only returning a single element. We now have 2 cards. However, they are identical though. And we can use this card component whenever we want. I can include 4 if I would like. Alright everybody, so that is us making a card component. In the next video, I'll discuss props, where each component can have different values, because we don't want all of our components to look the same. And that was some React practice by making a card component. Yo, what's going on everybody? So in today's video, I'm going to show you a few ways in which we can style React components with CSS. This topic doesn't include external frameworks such as Tailwind or preprocessors such as Sass. I'm going to cover a few of the more basic techniques, including external, modules, and inline CSS styling. We will need a component to work with. Let's begin with a button component. Let's go to our source folder, new file, button.jsx. We'll create a function-based component because we like function-based components. Be sure to export it because I sometimes forget to do that, so let's do it now. Export default, the name of the component. Then we will return a single button element with text that says, click me. Normally when setting a CSS class, you use the keyword class. However, in JSX, that's a reserved keyword. We'll instead use class name with a capital N. I'll set my class name to be button. Alright, then we just need to import this button component. Going back to our app component, that's the parent, we will import button from its location, /button.jsx. And now we have a button component to work with. There's my button. Let's begin with external CSS styling. We should already be a little familiar with it already. Heading to our index CSS style sheet, we can apply some global styles. We will select the class name of button, to select a class, button. Let's apply the following CSS properties, but feel free to make any changes or alterations. I will begin with a background color. I've already pre-picked a color. Personally, I like using HSL values. 200 for the hue, 100% for the saturation, 50% for the lightness. That will give you a light blue color. For the font color, that would be the color property. I will set that to be white. For padding, let's say 10 pixels by 20 pixels. Border radius to round the corners, I will set that to be 5 pixels. Border none to remove the border. Then let's change our cursor to be a pointer when we hover over the button. That's not a bad looking button. I am zoomed in to like 300%, just for this demonstration. Alright, we have utilized an external CSS style sheet. They're easy to use for simple projects, such as making a YouTube video tutorial. It gives you flexibility with media queries and pseudo-selectors. You can use external style sheets to apply global styles throughout your web application. However, using external style sheets can lead to naming conflicts, especially when you have more components and classes to work with. If you have a large web application, you'll likely have all sorts of different buttons. You would need a strong naming convention and good organization. 2 buttons you may create might have the same class name by mistake. And with large applications, it might be difficult to keep track of all the different class names. Moving on to method 2, let's cut all of these properties, save. We're going to create a module now. That's the second method. We'll create a dedicated CSS style sheet specifically for each component. What you may see some developers do is they'll create a new folder specifically for their component. Let's create a new folder, which we will name button, the name of our component. Let's move our button component to the button folder. Let's move it. Be sure to update any imports as well. My app component is now importing the button component from the button directory. Within our button folder, we'll create a new file. This will be a CSS style sheet, which we will name the name of the component, in this case button.module.css. Let's paste all of those properties that we cut before. Now from our button component, we will need to import this module. At the top, we will import styles from the location of that module, /button.module.css. For our class name, we will use a set of curly braces to use a dynamic value. Our class name will equal our import of styles dot the name of the class, button. And there's our button again. The nice thing about modules is that it avoids naming conflicts because a unique class is going to be generated for you via a hashing algorithm. If I were to right-click on this button and go to inspect, this class name is unique. It's generated via a hash. So with modules, we don't have to worry about naming conflicts. Modules are also convenient if each component has its own unique style. However, a few of the downsides, though, with using modules is that it does require additional setup, and global styles aren't applied easily. You would have to import them from elsewhere, and that's a whole thing. Let's remove our button component from the button directory. Let's put it back in source. And delete our button directory. Going to our button component, then remove the import as well. We don't need that anymore. Now we're going to use inline styles. What you see some people do is they'll create a JavaScript object named styles. Styles equals a set of curly braces for an object. Let's paste all of those CSS properties. We're within JSX code right now. We can't use any dashes. We'll switch to a camel case naming convention. All values should be strings. Each property should be comma separated. Let's remove our class name. We will set the style attribute to equal, use a set of curly braces to insert a dynamic value. We will insert our styles object that contains all of these CSS properties. And now we have done inline CSS styling. Inline CSS styling is convenient and easy to understand. It prevents global style conflicts because we're not working with class names. It's great for isolated components with minimal styling, such as a like button or a subscribe button. However, inline styling can be increasingly less maintainable in large applications. It reduces the readability of your components, especially if you have a lot of CSS properties. It's not great for any complex styling, such as responsive CSS. It tends to be better for components with minimal styling. Alright everybody, so those are 3 different ways in which we can style React components with CSS. External, which is great for global styles or small projects. Modules, which is preferred for individual components that have their own unique styles. And inline, which tends to be good for any small components with minimal styling. Use what's best for your project, or your own personal preference, or whatever your team prefers if you're working on a project together. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately. Myself, I prefer to use modules, but throughout this series I'm going to be using a lot of external CSS, just because our projects are really small. And well everybody, those are a few ways in which you can style React components with CSS.